Welcome, these will be my thoughts on Arrow, Season 3, Episode 11, Midnight City. The episode's rated TV-14, so there will be spoilers for the episode and everything Arrowverse leading up to it, but not after this episode first premiered, and another episode that I absolutely loved. So, I guess I will briefly start with the one deleted scene. I think it's under 20 seconds. It's just Brick saying, they think they can just push us around, but we're more powerful than them. And then we see a bunch of the guys, stepping out. Like, it works as this thing of, like, building up to, because there's a lot of effective tension with, Brick and the bricks. Brick and the Briquettes throughout a lot of the episodes. So, yeah. So, in honor of Women's History Month, I'm trying to make sure the YouTube video I recommend, at least one per episode, is by a woman throughout this month. Today's, not only this month, of course, but yeah. Today's will be Cheyenne Lynn's It Takes a Village, but what happens when your village is toxic? Just fantastic. Really appreciate her starting to do these videos talking about, taking care of children. Now, I also really, this episode also works well for Women's History Month. I didn't plan it that way, but a lot of really great stuff with the female characters here. Felicity, really stepping up in Oliver's absence. Several of the others are basically like, we can't do this without Oliver. And Felicity's the one to keep pushing, and they end up actually, saving the surviving alderman. And as usual, they make sure she has the best line. The bit with the where Laurel is like, I guess you're here to talk some sense into me, and Felicity just deadpans, seems like you could use some. Really great stuff with Tatsu as well. I don't blame her for her penicillin tea tasting like penicillin. I don't know what Oliver was expecting. I guess it's just, he likes his quips. But yeah, she actually helped, during she helps Oliver, and she also fights really, really cool during and it's not like Oliver is currently in a state to do very much, so it's down to her and Maseo, and Maseo wouldn't quite have been able to do that on his own. There were 3 of the assassins, so. And also really appreciated that, she now does care for Oliver in the flashback. I mean, I guess that's some of the time what it's going to take for a woman who starts out not liking Oliver to end up liking him, is to save her life, which, I mean, he can't really get on your nerves, so fair. And perhaps most heartbreaking, Laurel. So, yeah, this, some of what I theorized, she tried being a vigilante, and, to be fair, by the end of this episode, she does really, really well. But at first, she really struggles. She can't quite stick the landing. That's not the very first scene, but, and she struggles several of the times. I guess there's at least one iffy moment each time she fights someone in this episode, and that's the thing. Like, yeah, she knows, she has that fighting style, and she's practiced. It's not quite the same. Roy points out, he was on the streets for years, and he got training directly from Oliver. This is a very different situation, and really genuinely deeply emotional when she has to pose as Sarah, because Quentin is simply not accepting. Yeah, and Katie Lotz did a fantastic job. it's one of those things, like, it's very difficult when you usually do live action acting to do voice acting, but she absolutely nailed it. And I think that might... Oh, right, Anthea. There's also some great stuff with Thea, not Anthea. Yeah, they I really appreciate her standing up to Malcolm and yeah, refusing to leave and saying, "We'll just, yeah, we'll fight." And yeah, I think that's yeah. Gonna try to keep the rest of this more or less chronological, scene by scene. I really, really love that they're giving this much weight to the fact that, because Oliver did almost die, like, they actually outright in this episode say, "You should have died," and yeah, like, the fact that the recovery takes a little while. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that there's supposed to be a week between each episode, so he's been there for at least an entire week now. It's been a week since he woke up at the end of the episode before this one. That, he's been there a week since that, and he is still, he won't stand for it, by which I mean he's struggling because he's still recovering to stand. And it is really cool seeing the rest of Team Arrow in his absence, his Arrow sense. And I guess, since my videos are not monetized, I'm in the absence of AdSense. Anyway, the yeah, I thought it worked well. That so it somewhat also functioned as a sort of previously on, even though it wasn't quite part of that. But yeah, and honestly, at first I thought it was Felicity having that dream, but it became clear, oh, this is a dream, But yeah, he didn't change his mind about telling, about reiterating that he does love her, but he wishes he had told her that he was going to stay, which is really sweet. And I like how, he leans in for a kiss and then she very much closes the distance. Like, it's like 20% him leaning in and the rest 80 is, remaining 80 is her. And then, he bleeds and the sword and just, yeah. So he has another thing to throw on the PTSD pile. And I think that does... I really appreciated this thing of, like, is he Maseo or is he Sarab now? And yeah, in some ways he is different, and that was also, she kisses him, and I appreciate, he doesn't, like, if he really just didn't want it at all, he could, like, pull away or, like, hold up a hand to signal stop or something. But he also does not reciprocate the kiss. He's very neutral, stone-faced. Maybe it's just because I'm playing a lot of Hitman 2016 these days, but it reminded me a little bit of at least one of the reactions that, yeah, Agent 47 has had to someone attempting to kiss him or going through with kissing him. Anyway, I think that brings us back to Starling City. So yeah, the part where yeah, Laurel, stopping, she does manage to the but it's not completely without problems, and she of course did not count on... Of course Quentin is going to think that that's Sarah. Like, what else would he think, And I think that might... Yeah, I thought it worked really well, Roy confronting her and pointing out, and yeah, she was, she was actually injured. And the thing about how, Dig taught both Roy and Felicity, sutures, and she learned it better than he did. And let's see, her pointing out, I mean, with Arrow gone, with Green Arrow gone, they need something. And the fact that the episode ends with the police being pulled out of the glades, like, that's gonna be, that's an uphill battle, especially without Oliver present. And it's not gonna make things easier if the assassins really are going to, because that's the thing, like, it's Sarab receiving the message, and he says he's gonna tell Raish, but I'm not entirely sure he doesn't, because he knows that one of the Merlins is Oliver's half-sister and how Oliver feels about her, but he's also saying that he's a different man now from back then, from back when he was Maceo. So very, very nicely done. I genuinely don't know how that's going to play out. Play out. What does that mean? Do it live. And I think that is the is that maybe when Palmer, so Palmer and some of the others go to the that meeting, and Brick is actually so audacious that he attacks it and tries to kidnap everyone there, and Laurel, badass, just actually manages to get one of the guys there. And Ray, holy crap. I agree with Felicity. Like, without her help, he's definitely going to end up croaked. And but Ray, does try to fight back against one of them. And I love the little moment where right before the gun is fired, and it's like, oh, I thought superpowers carried over from other roles. And but yeah, they actually managed to prevent Brick from getting as many as he had hoped. And I guess because it's TV-14, we don't see, I mean, I'm assuming that he is planning on slamming their heads in car doors. No, I don't know how I managed to not mention how awesome it is to see Vinnie Jones again. But I'll try to make up for it, because he really is awesome, here and elsewhere. Big fan of his Guy Ritchie work. And I think that might be when the I feel like there's at least one flashback around here. So yeah, genuinely, he actually was going to give up Alpha, and Waller knew, so swapped it out, knowing that and that was also a really, really cool fight. Tatsu, Masao, and Oliver all fighting back against and it's of course awesome seeing Shin Na-wei again. And let's see, I think that might bring us to the the part about how, I thought you weren't in contact anymore. We aren't. And that also has me wondering, because like by the end of the flashback of this episode, they are on good terms, the two of them. So I guess something else happens. yeah, that's they do a really great job of that on this show. Conveying, oh, something happened in the past, and we realize, oh, that's going to be in a flashback, isn't it? If I recall correctly, Sarah mentioned knowing. I'm afraid I think I'm barely keeping up with the names of the currently living characters. I am struggling a little to keep up to recall all the ones who have since perished. But she said, like, the last time I saw that cloak, it was on the island, and she was the one wearing it. So that, I believe that was before we even saw that Sarah was there, or at least before we saw her with the the other yes. And I feel like that brings us to the the couple of times where Malcolm and Thea talk, and the repeated line of checking, Malcolm wanting to see how the packing is going. It's not going. And Austin Butler, Chase, incredibly charismatic as always. And the thing about, what about our moment? You have a high opinion of your kissing skills. So did you, from your reaction. Do you need a reminder? And let's see. I think pretty much. But yeah, and Roy watched and confronts, and yeah, I was wondering if which of the surviving Merlins he was going to confront, but it was indeed Malcolm. He confirms, in dialogue, no, he's not looking for Thea. It's Malcolm. And I do also appreciate, like, I think at this point, Roy telling Thea what he thinks she should do. I don't think it's going to end well. So, yeah, there is some chance. And I love the little moment where Malcolm is, like, looking him up and down. And Roy is like, oh, right, I look like lunch to him right now. Because it is like, okay, yeah, you have some training from Oliver. That's very cute. But this is Malcolm, though. Like, Oliver had his hands full with Malcolm at his peak. And listen, I knew Oliver Queen. I worked with Oliver Queen. Oliver Queen was a friend of mine, and you, Roy, are no Oliver Queen. And the I guess that brings us to the let's see, it's that thing of so Laurel, gets some information, and it's one of those cases where, so if all of the criminals, street criminals, were portrayed by African American actors, or in general people of color, I would be like, this feels a little, like you're saying that's. But then, the most prominent African American character of the show so far is Dig, and before that, we also had Moira's, I'm afraid I forget his name right now, but him, as well. Am I right? For those who don't know, my wrists are simply too sore to look it up right now, but Colin Salmon's character, and they are good guys. So, and there are plenty of white men who are antagonists, even villains on the show. At some point, it would feel weird if the only times we saw minority characters were when they were good guys. That would also, yeah. And Laurel is yet again, doing something we know she shouldn't, because it's one thing that I like that she starts by, threatening him, and then she's like, I'm just kidding. I have another heel. And that's also great. That is something, I've seen in some of the comics as well this idea of, if a woman in, some kind of costume is fighting misogynistic men, she might use high heels and other, I let's see, in I can't believe I'm blanking on that movie's title, Batman Returns. It is, I mean, it's not literally her nails, but it's like nails. She's, yeah, Catwoman is, yeah. Anyway, right. Loved seeing, we get a better look of, or at least a little more time to really take in. Once again, the costume looks fantastic. Laurel looks so incredibly badass. I think, is it like belt buckles or something along those lines, look really, really cool. And I think that might be what, but yeah, so, what she is doing is technically illegal, claiming that he's going to be charged with a crime that she does not have evidence that he, or reason to suspect, really, So, yeah. And it ends up, they go on the mission, and an alderman ends up dead. None of the others are freed, and they didn't really get any positive result there, So it is very much saying, she broke the rules and did this, and then didn't even, get the goal. And that's such an important thing when you have a character doing something that is, wrong. You should show, because that's another thing that she now has to live with, in addition to the alderman dying, and obviously she blames herself for that. Yeah, she, as ADA, she is doing these things that are just not okay, and it's like at some point she might end up in a situation that she cannot maneuver herself out of legally, and like, yeah, it can really snowball if a bunch of different things are, because like there's several people who would be able to testify, oh yeah, here's something that she did that she clearly knew was illegal, but she blackmailed me into silence, kind of thing. And I guess that is, but yeah, I mean, the alderman ending up dead, they thought that they could just go in without, having a good enough plan and being sufficiently careful, and yeah, I mean, it's not exactly like bombing Iran, among other things. One of the reasons would be that there's not over 100 dead school children as a direct result, but it is still, yeah, don't be Trump, and don't, do what they did at that point in this episode either. And yeah, I really appreciated Quentin, talking about, like, I mean, Sarah should know that it's not really her fault. We have to talk to her. We have to, because he's thinking like a dad, and he doesn't know that she's dead. And yeah, just really, really, really strong. And so, yeah, she does indeed call him, and yeah, I mean, there's that thing about, like, Felicity says, she used voice samples of Sarah to make this, and yeah, I mean, that is a thing that I forget if I used to know when it was possible, because it is possible today. I'm not sure if I forget if it's something that, like, regular people could just get their hands on, but certainly, there is technology that can make someone's voice sound like someone else's, as long as you're running it through something like that. And it's possible that that was available in 2015 when this first aired. Let's see, what's the other thing? There's the but yeah, and her clearly thinking carefully about, well, what would Sarah say? I definitely noticed she said daddy a lot, more so than Laurel, even though she does also. And yeah, very clever about the pacemaker tracking. And yeah, they are refusing to provide any kind of medical attention to their captives. So, you know, Brick and the Brickettes are taking a page out of the ICE playbook. Or I guess it's the other way around, because the episode's over 10 years old. Anyway, the, yeah, I really appreciate how much Ray is willing to do in order to, like, Felicity is like, I mean, she only mouths hi, she doesn't actually say it, but still, like, she interrupts a meeting, and you also see the other people are like, I wonder how you get privileges like that. But yeah, and the thing about, like, can I have the keys to the helicopter? I promise it won't crash. It's the safest in its class. And then he's like, I'd feel more confident about your aeronautic abilities if you knew that helicopters don't have keys. And then later she does show up, they do have keys. But the let's see, and the, yeah, ultimately it's Dig flying, it's not actually, but Felicity says that he might be a little more reluctant, and she's trying to keep him from realizing that she's Team Arrow. So, and I think that does bring us to the, yeah, the whole parlay thing. I cannot believe he actually quoted Shakespeare. That's yeah. I mean, villains in comic book media like to monologue. Sometimes they just want to get to the part where they get to say the words. They don't want to think them up themselves. And if you're going to steal from the best. And yeah, the thing about, Ray Palmer, are you here to make yourself feel important? And, he's, I feel like this is Brick City. Not for long. Ray? Ray. You're not wearing the super suit yet, right? Because, like, that really, and Brick just gets up in his face and looks him up and down, just like, yeah. And also says, money is not going to solve this, because that's not what, he wants control. He wants another kind of power than the kind of money gets. And yeah, understandably Quentin is not on board, but the mayor is insistent. And ultimately I do think I understand why she's making the decision. And that's, again, it's important to have minority characters making these tough calls as well, because, like, there is a shockingly high number of members of the majority who have no idea that they do. Like, just, yeah. And, yeah, an argument could be made that she's making a mistake. This is a progressive channel. We support women's rights and women's wrongs. It is more interesting if the characters who are members of minority groups also get to sometimes make mistakes. And it's definitely, like, I guess I already said that in this video, but yeah, that's I really appreciate it. I wasn't sure if how big of a, but it's several episodes now that are bricky. And I feel like there's at least one more thing I really wanted to make sure to say. Yeah, it was really, really cool seeing when it did work out. And they are able to free the alderman. And yeah, at first, he he says, he doesn't like to hit women, and then he starts, and next time they meet, he tries to shoot her. So I was like, I guess he thinks of those as two different. I mean, I guess as long as he keeps missing, he's not hitting her, even with the bullets. But it's, but then he does say, he's ready to make an exception, and then she uses the little thing that to lure him in with the voice. Very clever. And that's, again, it's clear by that point in the episode she's not going to be able to take him out in a one-on-one fight. So work smarter, not harder. And I think does that. Let's see. I feel like that pretty much covers the. I can hardly wait to see. So Chase shows up again and speaks what the subtitles identify as Arabic. I have to admit, that's a language I'm not sufficiently familiar with to recognize by ear. But he is a spy for, and that's part of why he is getting close to her, which, very, very nicely done. Because you don't expect it, and as I had hoped, they are indeed giving Austin Butler more to do here. I gotta watch more. It's really, it is unacceptable that the only things I've seen of his are his episodes so far of this, of Arrowverse, Elvis, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Some of the other stuff he's made sounds very interesting, and I am going to watch it at some point. I'm so glad that he's able to have a career these days. And I think so. There's at least one more thing that I really want to. Yeah. We see that Sarab, injures himself so that he can claim to Raish that Oliver did that and then successfully escaped. And he hid the bodies of the ones he took out. And I am a little bit worried because, like, from what I understand from hearing about, as far as I understand, a professional can tell if a wound is self-inflicted or not. So it's and I get why. I mean, if he did ask, if he told Oliver to cut him, that is probably not going to get the result. And then if he afterwards says, okay, fine, I'll do it myself, Oliver's going to try to stop him. So I think there is just a little bit. Yeah, I also quite liked, when so Thea talks about it, right. Also, the thing about, Malcolm is like, I'm not really used to telling the truth. And then she's like, maybe you'll get better with practice, just, that did feel like something that, I guess maybe I should just be calling, that sounds like a Thea Queen thing, so it's nice to see that Thea Merlin does maintain, and it's not the first thing we've seen of that, but I'm glad that they're making that a thing. It's not like a one-off. Genuinely, there is still some of Thea Queen left, and it's this thing of like, I don't know if we're ever gonna get Thea Queen back, but maybe Thea Merlin could be, she's like at a 10. Maybe we could get her to a 2. It would be great if she, and I guess, but and he does tell her some, and some of what he says is some of the truth, with a couple of things just carefully edited to, and then she's like, well, they're going to try to kill us wherever we are. Why don't we stay for a while? See what happens. And yeah, she points out Merlins shouldn't be afraid of the League. The League should be afraid of the Merlins.